first electoral test for Rishi Sunak. Since he became the new UK Prime Minister, the opposition Labour Party has won the City of Chester by-election, retaining the seat there. Samantha Dixon becomes the constituency's new MP, securing more than 61% of the vote, with a 13.76% swing from the Conservatives. It's the Conservatives' worst performance there in nearly 200 years. The by-election was triggered by the resignation of Labour MP Christian Matheson, who was accused of serious sexual misconduct. For more on this, Dr. Nigel Fletcher, political historian at King's College London, joins me live. Dr. Fletcher, these results in Chester, we knew, I think, that Labour was going to win, but any surprises in the margin and the swing?
No, I don't think there's a huge surprise. I think that what's perhaps more worrying for the Conservatives is that they've sort of priced in this level of defeat. There was a comment from one Conservative MP that was reported this morning who just said, well, nobody cares. Well, I think that's quite worrying because if the result in Chester is repeated at a general election, it indicates the kind of swing that we're seeing in the opinion polls. And the opinion polls for the Conservatives at the moment that we can see are showing them losing the election very heavily. So I think there's almost a sense that the Conservatives are resigned to the fact that they're going to have these bad results. And that perhaps doesn't indicate that they've got much of an idea how they're going to avoid it.
We've had a series now of Conservative MPs saying that they won't fight the next election. Indeed, the very latest is Sajid Javid, former minister in several roles, saying that he won't stand at the next election. Is that a reflection of the Conservatives' electoral prospects heading towards a new election, or is there more to it?
Well, I think it's a number of things. Clearly, I think if the MPs consider that they're heading towards an electoral cliff edge, they're going to want to try and sort of get off the bus before they get there. But I think there's also in this a sort of a sense that politics over the last few years in the UK has really been quite brutal. And a lot of MPs who came in 2019 particularly, they were a lot younger. They were people who had not perhaps spent all of their time in Westminster politics. There were people who perhaps didn't expect to win their seats. So you had a lot of people in the Red Wall seats who were sort of local activists, local councillors, people who had come in as MP for the first time in those seats. And I think a lot of those, from what we've heard, have become quite disillusioned with the way that politics operates at Westminster. And as we've seen, it is pretty brutal. We've seen sort of two prime ministers dispatched in rapid succession. And of course, you know, we're seeing a huge amount of unpopularity. MPs are getting a lot of abuse on social media. That's something which we've seen across all parties over the last sort of decade or so, which is quite unpleasant. But I think there's something about the culture at Westminster. MPs just aren't really enjoying it. And that's a comment that you do hear from MPs, some of whom are saying they'll stand down now, others who may announce that they'll stand down later, is that, you know, they're just not enjoying it. It's not something that they're enjoying as much as they perhaps wanted to. So I think there's a lot of that in it. But of course, you know, if you're looking at the prospect of losing your seat and having to spend the next 18 months to 2 years defending a government that's getting increasingly unpopular, that's a bit of a tough sell. And of course, people who want to go on and do other things may want to start looking around now, even if that's not perhaps, you know, going to Australia and going to the jungle.
If you're Rishi Sunak, the new UK Prime Minister, you're looking at national polls where you're miles behind the opposition Labour Party. You're looking at the result in Chester, a big swing away from your party. Is there anything out there as we head into a difficult winter of industrial action and likely a recession? Is there anything out there in terms of good news for Rishi Sunak looking ahead to that next election?
Well, I'm not sure that you can point to anything as specifically good news, but I think the hope for the Conservatives will be that as that election gets closer, traditionally we tend to see the gap between the opposition party and the government closing, and that's got a lot to do with people tuning back into politics. I mean, it does feel in recent years that we've had nothing but politics. But ordinary people, ordinary voters, a lot of the time they don't really obsess about politics, and they really only tune back in when they're facing that decision of a general election. So we sometimes expect to see that the electorate will start taking a closer look at Labour. And I think mustn't forget that Labour are in a difficult position as well, because the economic situation that they will be inheriting if they form a government is extremely bleak. In Jeremy Hunt's budget recently, he put most of the onus for future cuts to public services beyond the next election. So Labour are either going to have to accept that and make some pretty difficult decisions, or they're going to have to put forward a different agenda, which may involve more borrowing. And we've just seen how the markets react to that when the Truss government tried to do it. So there's no easy solution for Labour either. And I think the Conservatives might be hoping that the electorate will take a closer look at them towards the next general election, and perhaps put them under a bit more pressure.
Dr. Nigel Fletcher, King's College London, thank you.